Welcome to the Safety Map podcast. I'm Alyssa Decker, founder and developer of the Safety Map framework, and this is where we talk about how safety, not performance, is the foundation of healing. We're talking about healing that goes beyond coping skills and into structural change. I'm so glad you're here. Have you ever wondered why kids lie when telling the truth would clearly be easier? Or why they hide the thing that you are so obviously going to find? Or why they melt down over something that seems so tiny? Why do they argue and push back and shut down and act like they have never heard you say the thing that you have actually said 47,622 times? If you are a parent, for more than about 3 days, you have experienced one of these things on some level. These are common kid behaviors and common parent frustrations. We think, why am I still here? Why am I still dealing with this? Why does this keep happening? And why on earth can my kid not just choose the answer or the behavior that would be easier for everyone? But there's a deeper question here. And the deeper question answers those questions. And that question is, what is this behavior protecting? That's what we're talking about on today's episode of the Safety Map podcast. Hey, Alyssa here. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Safety Map podcast. If you are enjoying this content, if you're learning something here, or even just identifying with what we've been talking about, please take a moment to subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're currently listening in on. This really helps other people find the content, and it makes sure that you don't miss a single upcoming episode. Thank you so much. Now back to today's episode. All right. Now, as we get into this topic about understanding our kids' behavior, understanding what that behavior is protecting, I want to say right off the bat that understanding is not permissiveness. I'm going to give you a new lens for understanding why the behavior is happening. But I want to be clear right up front that just because the lying or the aggression or the disrespect or the meltdowns make sense does not mean that we have to accept or tolerate those behaviors. It doesn't mean that there are no boundaries. It doesn't mean that there are no consequences. It doesn't mean we tolerate harmful behavior. Understanding protection is not the same thing as removing boundaries. Okay? Now, that said, understanding protection can help us determine more effective boundaries. Boundaries that will not just attempt to modify our children's behaviors, but will instead begin to speak to the underlying prediction, the underlying thing that your child is defending against. Okay? The goal here is to understand what it is that needs to be taught, corrected, supported, or repaired. All right, so let's start with lying, because I think lying is something that all kids do at one point or another. Some of us more than others. I was an excellent liar when I was a kid. I could look my parents in their eyes and tell them anything, and they believed me. I was actually a pretty habitual liar growing up. And if my parents are listening to this episode, they just found that out for the first time. But for our kids, lying can show up in a lot of different ways. I'll say to my youngest daughter, "Did you brush your teeth?" And she'll say, "Yes." And I'll say, "Okay, great. I'm going to go make sure your toothbrush is wet." And she'll be like, No, hold on, don't go yet. Let me check first." Right? Which is her way of saying, I know if you go and feel my toothbrush, you will discover it is not wet. Right? But yet she still tells the lie. Sometimes I think this is so obvious. Like, all I have to do is walk into the bathroom and I can confirm or deny that you have brushed your teeth in the last 10 minutes. It gets frustrating because the question becomes, why are we doing this, right? This is the hard way. There's an easier way to get here. Like, instead of spending 10 minutes trying to convince me that no one broke the plate, let's just tell the truth and move on, right? Sometimes we're not even mad, and it's like, what could my child possibly be thinking they are going to accomplish by lying to me, right? I wasn't mad about the plate. I am kind of mad about the lying now, right? Here's the thing. Lying is often interpreted as a character problem. And as parents, we often react in a big way to lying because we are making an assumption, whether we realize it or not, that if my kid is lying to me right now about brushing their teeth, they are going to become the kind of adult who lies. And I cannot let that happen. That is on me to prevent that from happening. I am failing as a parent if my kid grows up to be a liar. So let's look at why this is happening. Many times, lying is not primarily about truth. Lying is about survivability. Which action, which words, which presentation of the facts feels the most survivable to my underdeveloped, still learning safety map? Which behavior is the most likely to keep me connected, to keep me safe, to make sure that my needs continue to be met? Again, we are not talking about adult logic. We're talking about children's nervous system predictions. Children do not become more honest because they are afraid. Okay? We cannot scare our children into telling the truth because children will often lie more if telling the truth feels unsafe. Children become more honest when truth becomes more survivable. Children's system, the child system may be asking, can I tell the truth and stay connected? Can I tell the truth and survive your reaction? Can I tell the truth and not be shamed? Can I tell the truth without losing who I am in your eyes, without it changing how you see me, or without losing value in this relationship? Can I tell the truth without this becoming evidence that I am bad? If every mistake becomes a character trial, hiding and lying begin to make sense. Now, as parents, I don't think we do this intentionally, but I want to give you a scenario of how this plays out so you can see it at work. Let's say your child broke a plate. You know they broke the plate. You're standing there holding the broken plate in your hand and your child is lying to you about it. If the conversation progresses in a way where the child eventually admits the truth, and what happens next is they stay connected, they stay safe, they're not shamed, okay? That doesn't mean they're not corrected. It doesn't mean there's not a consequence. It means the connection with you, how you see them, their identity remains intact. The next time, they will not have the same need to defend against those potential consequences. On the other hand, if you're in that same scenario and your child finally admits the truth, and what they get in response is, you are bad. I cannot believe you did that. Get away from me. I don't want to see you anymore. I can't stand being around you right now. You are a liar. You're a bad kid. those kinds of messages reinforce the behavior. In other words, their system learns telling the truth had exactly the same consequences that their system predicted. It resulted in the very thing that they were afraid of. So, how can we as parents encourage truth telling by promoting and establishing safe connections with our kids? Okay. Let me give you some questions that will give you a different way of approaching this. Instead of saying, "Why did you lie about that?" Try this. What did telling the truth feel like it might cost? What were you afraid would happen if I knew that you broke the plate? What did your body want to do when you realized you were caught? Asking these kinds of questions not only helps your child discover their own experience, but it gives you a tremendous amount of insight into what is going on in their system. What did their system believe was at risk, and what were they trying to protect with the lie? Let's talk about hiding for a second. I have noticed that children have a tendency to do one of two things. Either they get more aggressive, they lie, they yell, they have meltdowns, or they tend to hide or withdraw or comply. Most kids have a mix of both, okay? But kids tend to gravitate more towards one or the other, which isn't really surprising when you think about the fact that most adults in relationships, we gravitate towards one or the other as well. So let's talk about the hiding and the withdrawal side of kids' behavior. I'm talking about the backpack with the unsigned form. I'm talking about food wrappers hidden under the bed, or the screen use that they try to hide from you, or the mess that got shoved into the closet. I'm talking about the child who hides their emotions from you. They go into the closet to cry instead of crying in front of you. Or the child that is clearly angry and clamps their mouth shut and says nothing. For kids, hiding protects against exposure. Okay, so if something feels vulnerable or if something feels uncertain or unsafe, hiding often is a strategy to try to prevent the exposure of that thing. Okay, in most cases, the child already knows, especially older children, already know that there's a problem. They may already feel overwhelmed. They may already feel ashamed. They may already know that they don't know how to fix it. So they try to avoid the exposure of that thing that feels vulnerable. If exposure does not feel survivable, hiding becomes the safety strategy. Okay? Children are learning in real time what exposure costs them, what vulnerability costs them. They are learning if our response to hiding is more pressure and more shame or disconnection, then it will confirm for them. Our behavior can confirm for them that the prediction that hiding was safer was necessary. What the child actually learns is, next time, I need to hide better, right? So when your child hides something and they are exposed, their system is learning either exposure is safer than I thought it was, so maybe I no longer need to hide, or they are learning next time I need to hide better because exposure was just as dangerous as I thought it would be. Okay. Meltdowns. Let's talk about meltdowns. One of the number one most frustrating things that can happen as a parent. You're in the middle of the grocery store and your 2 or 3 or 5 or 7-year-old starts screaming And there is nothing you can do to calm them down. They have the wrong color cup, or we're not buying bananas today. A sibling looked at them wrong. The wind blew on their face wrong. The math problem isn't right, no matter how many times they've tried. Meltdowns are usually not about the size of the event. Okay? In other words, the meltdown is not an expression of this one thing, the fact that I got the wrong color cup, or my seam on my socks is rubbing me in the wrong place. Meltdowns are usually the expression of cumulative overload. Your child's system is over capacity, and it is using the meltdown to release pressure. Capacity is gone. I no longer have the ability or the energy or the skill set to handle this according to my maturity level. And so I am just going to lose it as a way of letting off steam. When a child melts down, similarly to when an adult gets activated or dysregulated, they often lose capacity for language, for reason, for flexibility, for cooperation. If you've ever had a toddler who got overstimulated and overtired and they melted down, you already know this, right? There is no reasoning with them in the moment. Just calm down, go to bed, and you'll feel better in the morning. No, I won't. I don't want to go to bed. I'm not tired. What has happened in that moment is that their capacity is gone. And they have now lost access to reason or patience or cooperation, right? Most experienced parents will tell you that when your toddler gets to that point, the only solution is to take their shoes off, give them a hug and a kiss, and plop them in their beds, right? The only thing that will fix that for a toddler is rest. It's restoring capacity. But because meltdowns are a response to lack of capacity, to overwhelm, overload, a child in a meltdown may become less reasonable the more reasonable you try to be. In other words, the more we try to reason with them, the more demand we are making on their capacity, and the more their system reacts to that demand or that pressure. A meltdown does not mean we tolerate the screaming or the behavior or the whatever form of expression your child uses in a meltdown. A meltdown means your child's over capacity. So how do we deal with that? We approach our child and we say, I'm here. I see you. I can tell you're having a hard time. We can talk when your body is ready. I will be here when your body is finished, when your body has calmed down. I am with you. I am not scared of your meltdown. I am not leaving because of your behavior. You do not scare me. I can handle your meltdown for both of us. Okay? You may still have to pick your child up and carry them out of the store. You may still have to put them in bed when they are screaming that they are not tired. You may still have to take the cup away because they don't have the restraint to not throw it. What matters most to a kid in a meltdown is the steady presence of an adult who can handle them. Kids in meltdowns often feel like they cannot handle themselves, like their emotions and their eruption and their expression is too much for them to handle. And so our job as a parent becomes, your meltdown does not scare me. I can stay connected to you while you have these big emotions. Pushback, mouthing off, disrespect. These things are often signs that your child is trying to protect their autonomy, their agency, their dignity, their control. When they argue, they correct, they negotiate, they refuse, they debate, they slam doors, they say no, they might do it slowly, they might do it loudly. They are making the simple things harder than necessary, and they're doing it loudly. We often think that because our kid's pushing back, they don't respect us. But pushback is often a test of autonomy, a test of agency. A child who feels powerless may try to create power through resistance. One of the most interesting ways that this shows up, especially in younger children, is food battles, right? Kids learn very, very early on that we cannot actually make them eat. We cannot chew up their food and put it in their stomach for them. And so for many kids who feel out of control in other ways, they will try to find control through controlling their food. They discover, aha, this is one way that I can have some control. Now, I recognize that some kids have sensory issues and they, of course, are allowed to have foods that they genuinely dislike. But I'm talking about the child who 1 week loves dino nuggets, the next week can't stand dino nuggets, and 3 weeks later, they can't understand why you stopped buying dino nuggets. This could be a child who is trying to feel a sense of control. They're trying to feel as though they have some say in their own lives. They may be trying to understand, what does it look like to be autonomous, to be a separate being from my parents? What does it look like what does it mean to be maturing into an older kid, into a young adult? When we meet this kind of resistance and this kind of pushback, again, the answer is not just let your kid run the house, let them eat whatever they want. The response is safe agency, safe choices wherever possible. I ask questions like this. Do you want to put the silverware away before lunch or after lunch? In other words, you are going to put the silverware away, but this is the part of the choice that belongs to you. Do you want help to get started? Or do you want to try on your own first? Do you want to talk now? Do you need 5 minutes? Little ways that we can give our kids some control and some agency can go a long way to dealing with defiance and disrespect. We can tell our kids, you cannot refuse this responsibility entirely, but we can also talk about and acknowledge the parts that feel really hard about that. You cannot speak to me this way, and I want to help you understand what happened when you chose to speak to me that way. Safe agency is something that our kids need very much as they grow, more and more as they get older. Safe agency is not the same as lack of authority. Kids need authority. They need boundaries. They need structure, and they need to experience agency. These behaviors that we've been talking about are so challenging sometimes for us as parents. They trigger our own threat predictions. They set us off in ways that we didn't even see coming. We often default to trying to correct these behaviors with pressure or with threat or with pushback of our own, right? Our systems are like, absolutely not. This feels terrible. Get me out of this. And so we sometimes look at our kids, and what we essentially communicate to them is, your behavior is making me uncomfortable. Knock it off right now, or there will be consequences, right? But feeling as though they are responsible for our emotional reaction can increase the lying and the hiding and the meltdowns and the pushback. Why? Because the pressure The way that we apply the pressure confirms the original prediction. I am unsafe if I'm exposed. I am trapped and I have no choice. People leave me if I behave a certain way. A child who feels cornered will protect before they reflect. Now, as we kind of wrap this up, let's look at one more aspect of this. What do our children really need to learn? We, as parents, often focus on the behavior. How do I get my kids to stop lying, to stop melting down, to stop being defiant? But what if, before correcting the behavior, we asked a deeper question? What does my child's system believe this behavior is protecting? Is lying protecting them from shame? Is hiding protecting them from exposure? Is melting down signaling lost capacity? Is pushback trying to create autonomy or preserve dignity? What does that child need to learn instead? And these lessons often look like this. Telling the truth is survivable. Mistakes can be repaired. Limits and boundaries and correction do not mean loss of connection. Disappointment is tolerable. Their voice matters, even when they don't get their way. These are very different lessons from stop being bad. Now, this all sounds probably easy in theory, right? It is very difficult many times in practice. We're tired. We've already explained it 47 times. The baby is crying. Dinner is burning. Someone has lost their shoes again. And now your child is standing in front of you, lying to your face about something completely obvious. And in that moment, you're probably not thinking, oh, what a fascinating example of threat prediction and protective strategies. Listen, I get it. I am not even thinking that in those moments. You're probably thinking something more like, are you kidding me right now? Here's what I want to leave you with, because this is not about pressure for you either. This framework is not about becoming a perfectly calm robot parent who always understands exactly what's happening in every moment. This framework is first and foremost about establishing for your kids the real you, the whole you. Your voice is welcome here. And you can show up authentically, honestly, fully, with mistakes, with flaws, with poor choices, with meltdowns, and I will be here. What matters most to your kids is not that you never get angry. It's not that you respond perfectly. It's not that you always understand. What matters most to your kids is that there is repair. That when you are wrong, you apologize. That when they are wrong, not only are you teaching them how to apologize, but you're proving over and over again that even when they're wrong, connection is stable. We're not trying to build in our homes perfect kids or perfect parenting. We are building nervous systems that are stable enough, that experience enough safety and enough repair that they learn how to remain connected to themselves and to others while reality happens. Okay? There are going to be moments when you are overwhelmed. There are going to be moments when you are frustrated. There are going to be moments when you question your decision to even have offspring in the first place. And the answer is not, you must be perfect. Now, before I leave you today, I'd like to give you some questions to help you think through what is actually happening in your family dynamic with your particular children. So here are some questions. Where does your child lie, hide, melt down, or push back? What have you been trying to stop? Have you been focused on correcting the behavior? Or have you been aware of what the underlying thing that your kid is trying to protect is? Has your intervention been focused on what their nervous system is learning? Or has it been focused on the behavior? And what does your child need to learn instead? What are some ways in which you could make truth, repair, accountability, disappointment, or limits and boundaries more survivable? Behavior is the surface. Safety and prediction are underneath. And when we learn to work with what is underneath, the behavior begins to make a lot more sense. And not only that, when we work with what is underneath, the behavior often becomes unnecessary. It changes, sometimes very rapidly, when we address the underlying threat prediction. If this episode brought up something in your family or a pattern that you are noticing and you would like to reach out and share with me, please do feel free to do so. I've put my email address in the show notes below. I would be happy to help you take a look and see if we can figure out together what patterns are happening in your family and what those underlying threat predictions are. And while you are there in the show notes, look for the link to my new secret podcast. These are 3 episodes that you can listen to on your phone, in your car, wherever you are, that will help you begin to identify the threat predictions that your body is making. Your behavior makes a lot more sense than you probably think it does. And if you want to learn what that looks like, go grab those secret podcast episodes. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on another episode of the Safety Map podcast.